My wife and I purchased a 2016 Toyota Highlander XLE all-wheel drive. We drove for about 400 miles when the check all-wheel drive system light came on, as well as the check engine light. The car drove perfectly fine. There was no issues except for these lights that were on. I hooked my scanner up to the Highlander, and there were several codes regarding the Evap system: P0441, P0445, and P1604. The other code that was on was C1241, which results in the check all-wheel drive system light being on. And apparently, when there's an Evap code thrown on a Toyota, there's multiple other codes that can be thrown with it. I knew virtually nothing regarding Evap systems and how they operated. Thanks to Mike at Wells Tech, he did several excellent videos regarding Evap systems on Toyotas and how they operated. The first video was like an hour and 30 minutes long, and I will include the link to that video in the description because it's fantastic. I'll also include a short clip of him discussing what an Evap system is, and there's an excellent visual representation that goes with it. I think just really does a nice job of explaining how the Evap system works. But on the Toyota Highlander 2016, it is an intrinsic Evap system.
We have our fuel tank down here, fuel tank pressure sensors in there monitoring the pressure or vacuum in our tank. Those vapors are building and they're traveling up this hose into our canister. All right, our canister's job again is to filter those vapors because we can't allow those vapors out in the atmosphere, so we're filtering, and they're going to travel up through this hose and through our normally open vent solenoid into the atmosphere. So if we're building pressure in here, we're able to vent that pressure into the atmosphere after it's filtered, and it goes up into the atmosphere, okay? So this is this, I know it says idle mode here. This isn't engine idle. This is like the system in idle. This is the system key off, engine off. This is the system when it's not purging. This is the system when it's not testing. This is the system just kind of hanging out, doing what it's supposed to do. But at some point, that charcoal canister becomes saturated. Those fuel vapors overcome the capacity of the charcoal canister potentially, and they need to go somewhere. We have to get rid of those vapors. That's when we open up that purge solenoid. So then we would have something that looks like this. So again, our vapors are flowing up from the fuel tank into our canister, and at some point the computer decides, okay, it's time to turn on the purge solenoid. Let's clear that canister of fuel vapors. So we're going to open up the purge and allow the engine vacuum here to draw the vapors out of the canister and restore the, or just empty the canister of the vapors. Let me pause this so you guys can see. All right, so we're drawing those vapors.
The plastic engine cover just gets removed by popping it up, and then just comes right off. For an Evap code, there are 3 things I would check. The first thing I would check for an Evap system leak is the gas cap. So if it's not seated appropriately, or if that rubber seal is broken down, that can be a cause of the leak. Now, I will put one caveat in here. If you're planning on doing a smoke test, I would not check the gas cap first or take it off, because you won't be able to definitively say it was leaking from the gas cap if you do, mess with it. So if you have no interest in doing a smoke test, I would start with the gas cap. 2, I would come up here to the engine bay and just check all the lines to make sure, 1, they are connected, and 2, to see if there's any obvious cracks. So here's one of the lines. It's coming from the air intake to the purge valve, and so all I would do is just run the line, make sure 1 is in fact connected, and 2, make sure there's no cracking. And then here's the second line. It's going from the purge valve. It's going to go back down the engine bay and all the way underneath the vehicle, and this goes back to the canister. So again, just make sure there's no cracks, make sure they're on. And then the third thing I would check is the purge valve, which is right here. The purge valve should be closed at all times, except when the computer sends a signal to it to open, so it pulls the fuel vapors from the canister and dumps it into the engine. So normally it should be closed. Only when the computer commands it should it be open. So if you were to take this purge valve off, disconnect it, and blow air through one side of it, it should not come out the other. If it does, that means it's defective. To test this, what we'll do is you have 1 of 2 options. 1, if you have a scan tool that's able to command the purge valve, you can test it in that manner. Or secondly, probably the easiest is just pop off this wire harness. This will prevent any signal from the computer to reach the purge valve, and then take off the top line. Again, this line is the one that goes to the back, to the charcoal canister, and then we'll test to see if there's a leak. So I've disconnected the wire to the purge valve, so there's no way for the computer to communicate with this to tell it to open. And then I also disconnected the hose that goes back to the canister, the back of the vehicle. And what we'll do is we'll turn the vehicle on and we'll test for a leak. Now, be aware that this will throw a code. You'll get an Evap code, and if you have a scan tool, you can clear it. If not, just go to Advanced or AutoZone and they can clear it for you. But the idea is, while the vehicle is running, with either a gloved finger or a piece of paper, you're going to test to see if there's a leak. So what you'll do is, while it's running, maybe 10 to 15 times, put your finger over it, and if it's a slight leak, you'll feel that glove kind of being sucked down in there. Now, this one was not leaking. I'll attach a YouTube video in the description from another individual who did this test, and this is where I learned it from. And you can actually see in that video that there was a leak, and you can see what that looks like. So, all right, it's running, and so what you'll do is take a glove finger and just put it over here, and you can see it's not being sucked out of there. So this is a good purge valve. It is not defective, so that's not where the leak is coming from. I have yet to identify the source of the Evap leak. The hoses are all attached. There is no cracking in the lines, and the purge valve is working as it should. The next step is to do a smoke test. I do not have a commercial smoke tester, so I built one. I got this idea off of YouTube. I'll put a link to the video in the description. I used a paint can and 3/8 air fittings. I'll also make a video of how I made this in case anyone's interested. So what you want to do is pop this off, and then that is where we're going to smoke. We're going to send smoke back through there, and then we'll look at everything in the engine compartment, as well as the lines back to the fuel tank, and then over to the charcoal canister, which is located above the muffler on the passenger rear of the vehicle. So I have the homemade smoker hooked up to my air hose. If you have a bike hose, that works as well. There's some YouTube videos on how guys do that. And then you don't want much pressure on this at all, so I have the regulator all the way down, and we're just going to turn up a wee bit. And let's check. Yep, there we go. Some good smoke there. So what we'll do is we'll get this hooked up to this line here. I'm using a 5/8 hose on my homemade smoker. Fortunately, it fits nicely over the canister line. If it had not, I would have simply put them together and used duct tape. So I'm under here checking for leaks in the lines, black hoses that run up to the front. Nothing really up in here. And then if you look up here, that's where the charcoal canister is. It's a terrible light angle. Charcoal canister is up there above the muffler, and I looked all around there. I don't see anything that's leaking. And then you come up here. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. You can see with that gas cap, the smoke is just pouring out of the gas cap. The gas cap just seats down in there, and there is a rubber O-ring. I don't see any obvious tears or rips, but this plastic can just, the rubber can just get brittle, and so I'm gonna go buy a new gas cap and we'll fix the problem.